Hello, I'm Don McCauley, and this is my friend Jim McDowall. Today we are going to talk about his extensive collection of movies.
Hi, Don. Well, coincidentally, since Don mentioned my movie collection, I just updated my movie list earlier today. I did receive in 2 new titles today. One of them was just released on Tuesday. It's called Journey into Fear, and it's a movie that, to the best of my knowledge, has never been available even on DVD. I owned a VHS tape, and I was always waiting for it to come out in another format, and it finally did come out on Tuesday. And it's one I haven't seen in quite some time, but I was very excited to hear that Warner Archives was releasing it. Orson Welles was the partial director of it, and he also appears in it as well. And it's one that I'm very much looking forward to. And Warner Archives has a very good reputation for producing quality video releases, so I expect this one to be up to their usual standards, and I can't wait to see it.
So before we go into some of the other movies that I'm excited to hear him talk about, he's got a great influence. I'm going to let him speak about he graduated in 1970 from Antioch High School in Illinois, and he had an English teacher that was very instrumental in why he became interested in movies. So I'm going to let him talk about that now.
Yeah, I had told Don about this earlier, that if this teacher had not been teaching in my high school, there would be no videos behind me. He was very influential in exposing me to great movies. And at the time, I was unaware of the quality of the films that he had selected for us. But looking back on it now, many years later, he really knew movies and had picked some very good ones. He was my English teacher, and Mr. Corrigan, I'm not sure what his first name was, it might have been Jim, but Mr. Corrigan, I think we probably had kind of a personal relationship in the sense that I remember he taught me how to play chess. He came out to my house and we played chess, and maybe that wasn't typical for teachers and students to interact that way. But he taught, I believe, a creative writing class, and one of the things that happened in his class that surprised me, because I didn't even know if it was breaking some kind of law, but we actually got to watch movies while I was in class. So Mr. Corrigan had arranged for us to see a number of very, very good movies, and it made a strong impression on me. And one of my favorites was On the Waterfront, which I had to check this again to make sure. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, and it won, I believe, 8 Academy Awards, and it just blew me away. It's a fabulous movie, a famous movie, and it was just one of several that were picked out by Mr. Corrigan. Another one was the first silent film I'd ever seen, called The Battleship Potemkin. And again, I didn't know anything about movies at this stage in my life. And Battleship Potemkin is one of the great movies of all time. And it's probably the subject for a further talk, but it's one of the greatest films that's ever been made. And there are reasons I say that, and I don't think we should go into it right now. But it was made in 1925 by the famous director Sergei Eisenstein, and it's still highly regarded. If you go to film school, you are going to watch The Battleship Potemkin. So again, this is one of the films that Mr. Corrigan picked out for us to see, and I remember it made a very strong impression on me. You could maybe call it a piece of propaganda, because again, 1925, it's a Russian film. It was made with a certain perspective on the Russian Revolution, and that's part of the story it tells. How these sailors rebel against intolerable conditions under the Tsar, and it's based on historical facts. So anyway, it's a great film, and it made a strong impression on me. Another movie was Raisin in the Sun, and I won't go into any great detail about this. It is, I believe, from the 1960s. It's one of Sidney Poitier's really great movies. It was released by the Criterion Corporation, and it's another great movie. And it's a look at a black family that's struggling with issues that are common to all people. And of course there's some racism involved, and one of the characters is going through, I guess at this time in history, a lot of African Americans are trying to reconnect with Africa. So one of the characters in this movie is going through that period where they're learning more about Africa, their connections with Africa, and that's part of the story that this movie tells. So again, I mentioned this to Don earlier, there are so many bad stereotypes in Hollywood movies. And one of them that came to mind for me was, there's a movie called The Ghost Breakers. It's with Bob Hope. And it's a comedy, but he has a servant in his movie, a black servant, and he's there for comic relief. And the way he talks and the way he acts are highly offensive now. And if you were to see this movie and to see this character, you would know what I mean. One of the stereotypes is that black people are easily scared. And of course this is a ghost movie because it's called The Ghost Breakers. So there are many instances in the movie where this black character overreacts and gets so scared, Mister, I got so scared. And it's offensive now, but back then that was the way white people saw black people. And so the reason I mention that is, you see blacks portrayed in movies like The Ghost Breakers from the 1930s, and then you see Raisin in the Sun, a totally different era in which black people are portrayed in very much more realistic terms. So Raisin in the Sun's a great movie, and if you've never seen it before, it's certainly worth seeing. And the Criterion Corporation did us a service by bringing that out. Another movie that was picked out by Mr. Corrigan was High Noon. And it just came out in 4K earlier this year, in a very fine transfer from the Kino Lorber Company. And it was my first Grace Kelly movie in 4K, and it has a terrific transfer. And there are it's a great Western. It's, if you had to make a list of the 50 greatest Westerns, this would have to be one of them. And I don't want to do maybe a synopsis on the movie itself, but it's one of Gary Cooper's best roles. And I guess one of the things that appealed to me about the movie is that he's a sheriff, and he finds out that these bad guys are coming into town and they want to settle a score with him. And he just got married, and technically he's not really the sheriff anymore. But the new sheriff won't be into town until the day after. So he's still duty bound to fulfill his obligation to this town. And there's 4 or 5 bad guys coming into town, and he's going to have to deal with them. So he figures, okay, his friends will back him up. It won't be a big deal. He'll deputize 10 or so people. He'll confront the bad guys. They'll go away. The problem's solved. Well, that doesn't happen because for various reasons, everybody makes excuses not to support him. So now it's getting close to noon, and he doesn't have anybody to help him. And his wife is anti-violence, and she lost 2 of her family members to gun violence. So she's dead set against any kind of violence involving guns. So she tells her new husband that if you do this, I'm going to leave town without you. So things are really falling apart for our hero, Gary Cooper. And he decides, at the risk of losing his wife and losing his life, he decides he's going to have to face them alone. And the only one that comes to help him towards the noon moment is a young kid. And he said he's not afraid, and and this is the only one that stepped forward to help him. And obviously he doesn't want to put this kid at risk. He's too young. He just tells him thank you, but no thanks. So anyway, there is a very famous sequence towards the moment when the clock strikes 12, and there are a number of shots in the movie. I know I'm talking too long about High Noon, but I will go on with it. There are a number of shots before noon actually occurs in the movie of clocks. So you know what the time is, and you know that the train with the bad guys is coming in at noon. So when noon strikes, there's a actually, a couple minutes before noon, there is a famous sequence, a montage sequence. And the montage is, there's no dialogue, and it's all done with music and individual shots. And this sequence is absolutely brilliant, and anybody who's seen the movie will not forget this sequence. It's the timing of the individual shots with the music, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's almost as though there's a metronome, and every time the metronome strikes, you get a change in the image, and it's just brilliant. And this goes on for maybe a minute or two, right to high noon. Then the train whistle blows, toot, and then the montage ends, and now he's on his own, and he's getting ready. He writes out his will. He doesn't figure he's going to be around much longer. So it's just a great sequence, and it's a classic montage in movies. And if you want to know what a montage is, watch High Noon and watch that sequence, because it's probably never been done better.
Before we go on to the next movie, I would just like to hear Jim make that train noise one more time.
Toot! So anyway, it's just, when I watched it in 4K, I actually tapped my foot to get the timing of the shots right, and it's clockwork. And the music, again, the music is wonderful in this as well. And it's the combination of the images and the music that make the montage just wonderful. So again, I was very happy with the 4K release. Grace Kelly looks fabulous in this movie. She's one of the great Hollywood beauties. And again, if you've ever seen High Noon, this is probably the best video format for watching it. So anyway, so after, and again, this is one of the movies that Mr. Corrigan showed to us, and I go, wow, he really picked out some great films. And another one was Prince of Players. I remembered that because it deals with the Booth family. John Wilkes Booth, who killed Abraham Lincoln, well, he came from a very famous family of actors, probably the most famous family of actors in the United States. And of course there was fallout when your brother, and the other brother in question was Edwin Booth, played by Richard Burton. Well, there's going to be fallout when your brother kills the President of the United States. And this movie in part deals with the family. His father was a famous actor. There were John Wilkes Booth and Edwin Booth, and it deals with the problems that arose from their brother killing the President of the United States. So that was just one of the movies that he exposed to us. And there was also The Informer, which was another John Ford movie. So these are all great movies. And again, one of my regrets in my life is that I never got a chance to go back and thank Mr. Corrigan for showing me these films, because without him doing that, I would have never seen these great movies, and the movies behind me, I would have never started being a movie collector and a lover of cinema. So after I left high school, I went to Eastern Illinois University, and one of the things that happened at Eastern, they had a foreign film festival every Wednesday night. And my movie education continued when I went to see these films, because frankly I had never seen a film with subtitles, and it's a challenge. And a lot of people, oh, I don't want to go to a movie with subtitles. So you either ignore a vast number of great films from Italy, Germany, France, Japan. You just, all right, you just don't add them to your vocabulary, or you learn Japanese, German, Swedish, and Italian so you can watch the movies without subtitles. So those are your options. So I decided to read subtitles and learn more about movies from places other than the United States. And there are rich movie traditions in many countries other than our own. Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and Don was just telling me about this one movie that is played continuously at his famous one of his favorite restaurants in Chicago. What was the name of that restaurant?
Cortino's. It's in Chicago. It's in the River North Entertainment District. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's always playing in there. It's very high quality. It's on at least 8-9 TV screens in there. So it's just a place to visit in Chicago if anybody is able to go there. Cortino's.
Yeah, and it's, the next time we talk, I will try and find out from Don what that movie is and see if it's in my collection, because I do have a number of Italian movies, and I don't know Italian. I know a few words of Italian, but, again, subtitles, it's just what you have to deal with. Again, you can go and learn Italian, but it's a little easier to read the subtitles. And, surprisingly, you can learn interesting things like the French word, merde, it means shit. And you hear that an awful lot in the movies. And, you can learn a few things about, it's not like the only word you would actually want to know if you're going to visit France. Do you know anything about the French language? Yeah, I know merde. Okay, you know how to say shit in French, but there's a lot more to our language than that. So anyway, that's just a little side humor that I wanted to throw in there. So one of the directors that I came across for the first time was Akira Kurosawa, one of the great directors from Japan. And one of the first movies I saw of Kurosawa's was Yojimbo. And if I remember correctly, the word refers to the bodyguard. And in the movie The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner, where he's protecting
Whitney Houston.
Yeah, Whitney Houston, he mentions the movie Yojimbo to her, because I think when she came to visit his place, I think he might have had a poster on the wall that referred to Yojimbo. So I saw Yojimbo for the first time, and it's been referred to as a Japanese Western. I go, well, what? That's what someone described it to me as before I went to see it. And it's a terrific movie. And since it was called a Japanese Western, it actually was the basis for a Clint Eastwood movie, For a Few Dollars More. For a Few Dollars More is Yojimbo set in a Western setting with people with guns instead of swords. But it's the same story, and Akira Kurosawa is actually given a writing credit for a Few Dollars More, because it's a remake of Yojimbo. So anyway, I was exposed to Kurosawa movies for the first time. I also saw my first Ingmar Bergman movies, which would be, that's a subject in itself. I saw The Seventh Seal, which is another of the great cinema classics, and Bergman's totally different. It's a totally different kind of movie than you get with Kurosawa. He deals with issues that are life and death and the existence of God, and so there's I guess you'd have to say they are heavy movies in the sense that they deal with very serious issues that normally are not covered in any kind of cinema. And that's what Bergman's reputation is based on. But again, if you want to know cinema at all, you need to see Bergman films and what he brought to the table with his movies. And I have a number of Criterion releases of Ingmar Bergman movies. And they're not all that, some of them are actually a comedy. But anyway, So I saw my first Ingmar Bergman movies. I think I saw my first Italian movies. I realized I needed to learn how to read subtitles a little bit faster. But again, that's just a challenge for people who, if you're interested in cinema, you can't ignore cinema from other countries. It's just you're not doing justice to the medium. So anyway, and again, I mentioned I got 2 new releases today from Warner Archives. This is one I have not seen before, and there's always a risk when you buy something you've never seen before that you'll watch it and you go, oh, I hated that movie. Why did I buy it? And I'm not anticipating that with this release, but it's certainly possible. And it's happened before. And, if you spent $35 on a movie that you're never going to watch again, that was probably not a good decision. But I've read, I have a number of movie review sites I go to. This is called The Man I Love. And I go to websites like Cinema Savant, which is by Glenn Erickson. He's been writing reviews for years, and he's featured on actually the Turner Classic Movie website. He wrote a review that's on their website, and he's recorded reviews that are supplementary material on other releases. So Glenn Erickson is a respected movie reviewer, and I go to his website. I go to DVD Beaver, which is, I know it's got a terrible, I don't know why they called it that, but it's another website I've gone to for movie reviews. They focus more on the quality of the release. Is it a good transfer? Is there film damage that you can see? Is it the right aspect ratio? So they don't really go into the history of the film as much as Glenn Erickson does. So you get a nice little synopsis on DVD Beaver of, is it a good transfer, or did they screw it up? Are the colors good? They talk about the audio quality, which isn't as much a concern for me because I have hearing aids. And they'll talk about the supplementary materials. Does it even have any? If you're going to pay $30 for a movie, it's probably not worth it if it's just the video. But if you get good supplementary material, then it adds to the value of the release. And then they'll just give you some comments overall on is this worth buying. So that's DVD Beaver. There's also High Def Digest. That's another one that's good for movie reviews. And then there's Slant Magazine. They have a video section where they deal with new releases.
Now, is that an actual print magazine?
And I'm not really sure. I know they have their own website. I don't know if it exists in a physical form.
Okay.
It might have at one time, but now it's another good source for video reviews. And they do go more into the history of the film, the production, and it's more of a more high-end criticism of the movie than you get with like a DVD Beaver. They mostly say, it's a good picture quality, but with Slant Magazine, some of the reviews are kind of challenging, honestly. What is this guy talking about? So that's another element in Slant Magazine. They can be a little challenging to read. And then there's also a Blu-ray.com, which I go to frequently. Every week there's a news section in which they highlight the new releases that are coming out. And I go there probably several times a week. And the interesting thing that's happening right now, I know I'm talking on way too much, but for years now, the demise of Blu-ray has been predicted. They're going to stop making them. It's only a matter of time. And they've been saying this now for probably 10 years. Well, that moment has not arrived yet. And judging by the number of new releases that come out every month from places like Kino Lorber, Criterion, Warner Archives, and there's a lot of other boutique offerings, they're still pumping them out. And they must be making money or they wouldn't be doing this. And every week I come across new titles that are being released in 4K. And I think 4K is now, it is helping physical media to survive. Because I just read this a few days ago. One of my favorite classic black and white movies is called Talk of the Town. It features Ronald Colman and Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. And it's never been on Blu-ray. And now it's getting a 4K release from Sony. And I go, whoa, what? And I'm going to buy it. There's no question about it. It's a classic Hollywood movie. And I'm shocked that Sony is releasing this on a 4K. I go, wow, that's great. So I honestly thought I would not be buying movies anymore when I retired. That was 5 years ago. And they keep pumping them out, and I keep buying them. So again, that's a surprise, and maybe physical media will be around for a while longer yet. Best Buy stopped selling it. That was disappointing. Target doesn't anymore. There aren't many left that do sell physical media, but I have 1,623 titles in my movie library, and you could probably access maybe 80% of them by various streaming options like Tubi, like Amazon, and Criterion has a streaming service. But again, if you're paying $15 or $10 a month for 10 different streaming options, that's expensive. So I prefer to have the physical media in my lap that I can access it anytime I want. It's never going to go away. I mean, it may deteriorate at some point, but I'm 72, so I'm not that worried about it 20 years from now. So again, that's just me. Physical media is not apparently going anywhere yet because they keep selling them. So they must be making money at some level. So anyway, that's what brings me, oh, I'm sorry.
Quick fact check. Target still sells a few movies. I think it's primarily new releases. So no big deal. I just want to give a special shout out to Target, especially if they'd like to sponsor our videos going forward. Wink, wink.
Yeah, no, that's true. And Walmart still does sell various 4K releases. But the interesting thing is, which is kind of ironic as far as I'm concerned, is there are more LPs on sale in your typical Walmart than there are 4K movies. And their 4K selection, they used to have a whole section for 4K movies, and some of them were at bargain prices. That just doesn't exist anymore. There are many, many more LPs, long-playing records that have been around a long, long time. There are more of them on sale at Walmart than there are 4K discs. So it's just a bit surprising. And maybe VHS tapes are going to have a comeback, but as physical media goes, I'm thoroughly on board with 4K. I have a 4K television, a 4K Blu-ray player, and I don't know how many of these honestly are in 4K. My list is one of the items on my list is it in DVD, is it a Blu-ray release, or is it 4K? I do mention that in my movie list. I gave this to Don just so he'll have a record of it. I list the directors as well, and I list any Academy Awards that were won by the particular title. And I also sometimes mention the director of photography, because it's surprising how often a certain photographer will appear in award-winning movies. You know, that's part of what makes a movie great, is the person who photographed it. And it's surprising, oh wow, James Wong Howe, he made a lot of good movies. He photographed a lot of movies. So that's another part of movie history that's maybe worth looking into. It actually had a few books on cinematography. There are books on cinematography. It's an art, and these men were at the top of their profession as photographers of movies, you know, and sometimes that would have been a challenging job, because certain actresses in the classic cinema period, like from the 30s to the 60s, they only wanted to be photographed in certain ways, and they had a lot of pull. So they would say, no, you're only gonna, I think it was Claudette Colbert, who only liked to be photographed from a certain angle. And she had a lot more pull than the director of photography. So if she said, I only want you to photograph me from this angle, you pretty much had to do that. So that was another challenge for a director of photography. Probably didn't happen all that often, but you would not want to make the actress look bad, because the guy who's paying for the film is going to say, why does she look so bad? What's wrong with the photography here? Who's doing this? And your career might be in the toilet if you did a bad job photographing a star like Marlene Dietrich or Barbara Stanwyck or any one of the great Hollywood actresses. So that was part of what you probably had to deal with as a cinematographer. You know, you wanted to make them look as good as possible because, again, that was part of the job requirement, and it helps overall with the marketability of the film. You go to a movie, a Marlene Dietrich movie, because you want to see Marlene Dietrich. You want to see how beautiful she is, and if you photograph her well, that adds to the value of the movie and the movie experience. So anyway.
So before we go to our last movie, I just want to interject that one of my favorite movie review sites for not just movies, but TV shows, music, everything, video games, is Metacritic. Jim, what do you think about Metacritic?
And that was something I came to rather late. But now it's one of my go-to sources for contemporary cinema. If I'm trying to decide if I want to see this movie, I usually almost always go to that website first. And I guess part of the reason now is with my hearing issues, people don't want to hear about this in the video, but the movie experience is not the same for me anymore because it's a challenge for me to hear what's going on the screen. And I actually tried seeing a movie I went to AMC, and they had a box that I could use to basically read subtitles on a new release, and it is a challenge. It turns every movie into a subtitled foreign film, and honestly, and it's a big box, so it wasn't the best movie experience. So now, generally, rather than go to a movie theater, I will buy the 4K release. And I did that with Mission Impossible, with a lot of the new Mission Impossible movies. You really should see that on a big screen, but for me, with my hearing issues, I would much rather just buy the 4K and watch it on my 65-inch TV. So one of the critic websites I mentioned earlier was Cine Savant, which is run by Glenn Erickson, and that's why I'm on this last title here.
If I Were King.
If I Were King. This came out earlier this year, and I mentioned Glenn Erickson because he's been writing reviews for many, many years. I think he's located in California, and I think he's close to my age. So I was on his website reading reviews the way I do usually, and I sent him an email. I thought, and it was about his movie collection. He's got more movies than I have. He's probably got 4,000 movies. So I thought, well, what are you going to do with your movies? So I sent him an email. I wasn't sure he was going to answer. I figure, he's kind of a celebrity, so he's not going to answer my email. Well, he did, and he told me, how old he was and what his plans were for his collection. I think he's got some kids, and he's got connections with California people. So he told me what his plans were with his collection. So I appreciated that fact. So that takes me to If I Were King. This is from 1938. It's black and white, and I don't remember when I first saw this movie, but I loved it when it came out. Ronald Colman is the star, and Frances D is his love interest. And the character portrayed in this movie was an actual French poet from the 15th century. I just looked this up before we came on air. I just wanted to get the facts. So Francois Villon is still regarded as a very important French poet, and he is the character played by Ronald Colman in this movie. So the storyline in this movie, it's kind of clever because Francis Fillon in real life and in this movie gets in trouble with the law. And he is brought before the king, and he has made some remarks about King, I think it's Louis XI. He's made some negative remarks about the king, which is not a good idea when you're living in France in the 15th century. So he gets in trouble and they're going to kill him. And he makes a boast that he could run France better than Louis could. So Louis puts him to the test. He says, okay, I'm going to give you this important office and I'll see if you can run France better than I can. So wow, what a twist. So in the process of he's got a new job. Now he's still basically a peasant, a ruffian, but he's given a new title, which makes him appear to be noble. And that brings him to the interests of Francis D. And Francis D ends up falling in love with him. Of course, I love a love story. So that's one of the things I like about this movie. But it's clever in the way that the King Louis XI is played by Basil Rathbone, who typically got the roles of villains. And in this, he's not playing that type of character. He's playing a very eccentric version of Louis XI. So the banter between him and Ronald Colman is clever. And the other thing that makes this movie interesting is the script was written by Preston Sturges, who I've mentioned to Don before. He was a very successful director in the 1940s. I think I own all of his movies from the 1940s. He is one of Hollywood's great directors, but it was only for a very short period of time in the 40s. But he wrote the screenplay for this movie, and that's one of the reasons why this movie sparkles, is the screenplay. So anyway, I really like this movie for a lot of reasons. It's a good love story, it's got a good script, but I only had it in a DVD version, and I don't think it had closed captioning, in which I need now, because of my hearing. So surprisingly, earlier this year, Kino Lorber releases a version of it in Blu-ray, and I couldn't believe it. It's kind of an obscure title, 1938. So someone at Kino Lorber had to have seen this and liked it as much as I did. And they said, hey, we're going to release this in Blu-ray. And it's a beautiful transfer. Much better than the DVD, and it's got closed captioning, so I don't miss out on any of that sparkling dialogue. So I really like this movie, and a few days after I had watched it, I said, I'll send a message to Glenn Erickson about this movie. Sin Savant, I'll say, hey, I really like this movie, and I just explained all the reason I liked it. I figured Glenn Erickson has seen this movie. Well, about a week later, I go to his website, and I was going to show Don this. I go to his website and I read his review. He said everything that I had said about it. Good transfer, he liked the story, and he added bits of information to it that I didn't know. But at the very end of his review, he admitted that he had never heard of this title before until someone had mentioned it on his webpage. Now, I can't take credit for that, but I do suspect that it was because of my email to him that he saw this movie and made the review. I'll never know for sure, but I have my suspicions that I introduced him to this movie. And I'm kind of proud of that, because he saw a movie that I enjoy very much, and now I've kind of paid it forward, I guess is the way. So that was very gratifying to me, to introduce someone who's got more movies than I have to a movie that he had never seen before, and he really liked it. So anyway.
Well, thank you very much for watching. We look to have many more of these types of conversations, make them all a little bit different, and feel free to put comments down below, and we'll have Jim respond to them as such. And that's going to be one of the highlights of doing this, is being able to bounce ideas and comments for movies or anything else we talk about.